There's never a trace of red. Now on the sidewalk, ooh, Sunday morning, lies a body just oozing life. Can someone sneaking round the corner? Could that someone be Mac the Knife? There's a tugboat down by the river, don't you know, where a cement bag just drooping on down. Oh, that cement is just, it's there for the weight to dare. 5 will get you 10 old Mackies back in town. Now did you hear about Louis Miller? He disappeared, babe, after drawing out all his hard-earned cash. And now Maggie, he's spent just like a sailor. Could it be our boy's done something rash? Now, Jenny Diver, ho, ho, yeah, Sugie Tawdry, ooh, Miss Lotta Lenya, and old Lucy Brown. Oh, the line forms on the right, babe. Now that Maggie's back in town. I said, Jenny Diver, whoa, Sugie Tawdry, look out to Miss Lotte Lenya and old Lucy Brown. Yes, that line forms on the right, babe. Now that Maggie's back in town. Look out, old Maggie is back.
Ladies and gentlemen, our program will resume in just a few moments. Please make your way back to your seats. Our program will resume in just a few moments. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin our next session, please welcome, representing the American Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Jay Berkelhammer.
Hello there. Everybody enjoying their lunch? I'm Jay Berkelhammer. I'm a general pediatrician and a past president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I spend most of my time these days advocating for the successful implementation of healthcare reform and promoting early childhood education for all children. And when I say early, I mean from the very, very beginning of a child's life. I'll take applause for that, that's fine. When I've been in the delivery room to see these extraordinary beginnings. When a baby fixes their eyes on their mother's, the gazes interact, and from the very moments that a baby is born, they're starting to learn. Properly encouraged, infants can set out a path for success. Each is born with so much promise and enters life needing critical support from parents, caregivers, and others to begin to realize their potential. This session will focus on the 0 to 5-year-old and will give you more understanding of what goes on in these very young minds, in their brains, and how they work. Oh well, I'll leave that part to the experts you're going to hear from, but I'd like to give a special recognition to the GradNation effort, which has become part of the ReadyNation effort, which has become part of the GradNation effort, which has really helped to bring the health and early learning components into America's promise and realizing the full value of the America's promises. Our first speakers are a dual group. It's Doctors Patricia Kuhl and Andrew Meltzoff, the co-founders of iLabs, the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences at the University of Washington in Seattle. Dr. Kuhl is the Bezos Family Foundation Chair for Childhood Learning, and Dr. Meltzoff holds the job in Gertrude Tamaki Endowed Chair, and they are internationally known for their work in early childhood brain development and early childhood learning. And I'm anxious to hear them. They will speak as a dual, one immediately following the other, and then we'll go on to our next speaker after that. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a very simple message to begin with today, and that is that the pathway to college starts right here. The child's brain has developed to such an extent by the time they enter school that many of the architecture that builds that brain ready for school and for life is already in place. As you can see from this slide, 92% of the volume of the human brain has already been acquired by the age of 5. What's happening inside that brain? Well, part of what's happening is the growth of the connections between the billion neurons that exist when we're born. The neurons are there, but the connections between them are not there yet. And so the job of early childhood is to connect each of the cells to one another so that you get a nested set of connections for all of those neurons so they can talk to one another just like telephone wires. And between early childhood, the age of 5 or 6, and puberty, the synapses, the connections between the cells that aren't used, are pruned. You prune a rose bush to strengthen remaining connections. Children prune the synapses in their brain that they don't need as they move towards puberty. So we've known these two facts for quite a while. But what I want to tell you about today is to give you a glimpse of what the newest brain science in the laboratories, such as ours at the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, is telling us about the baby brain. For the first time, we can get inside, get under the hood, and really look at an individual child's brain. This is a 9-month-old child. We can, for the first time, visualize that brain tissue. We can divide the brain into 116 areas and stare at each one and measure the extent to which that brain is developing in the way that one would expect. We can, for example, look at the concentration of gray matter and white matter in the 116 areas. And it makes a huge difference that depends upon the environment of the child. Even more stunning are images of the fiber tracts, the superhighways that are growing in the brain to allow one area of the brain to connect with another. Language areas, talking to social areas. So here we see the corpus callosum, which is the main pathway between the right and the left hemisphere, very well connected. The pink are the strongest connections, and you can see that small area of pink connecting right and left hemisphere. Look at our children at 5. Look at that brain and how well connected it is. It's pink all over. And these are stunning achievements, not only to be able to see them, but to understand how these connections and their growth depend on experience. If you're interested in language, like I am, you can look at 2 areas of the brain, Wernicke's for listening, what you're doing now, Broca's for talking, grammar, reading, and social interaction. You can see the little pathway between the 2, and we can now begin for the first time using a brand new machine called magnetoencephalography, or MEG for short. We can actually see a live brain in action. What I've showed you so far are snapshots, but now we can actually image. Here's a 6-monther. We're the first in the world to have young babies in this totally safe, totally non-invasive machine, and we're measuring what's happening in the brain as they are doing their work. And you can see this little tyke is totally comfortable. She can move. We can give her toys to play with. We can see how she reacts to objects and how she's listening. So why are we spending all this time and all this money on looking at that early period? Well, here's one good reason. There are critical periods in development, what biologists have called windows of opportunity, in which the environment floods the brain, and the brain codes an architecture that depends on that input, that environmental input. As you can see with regard to language, the children are geniuses. Find your age at the bottom and your skill on the vertical axis, and you'll see that the children are geniuses till the age of 7, and then systematically their abilities decline as they get to puberty. Well, what are they actually doing in that early period that's not what you and I are doing? We don't acquire languages to that ability. All of reading, the setup for language, and the skills that are so important to reading happen in that early period. Now, I want to show you something that a baby does very early in development, and then what's happening in her brain. This is a little test that we've run all over the world with the sounds of many languages. In order for children to learn a language, they have to focus on particular sounds that are used in that language to distinguish words. So this baby's sitting on her mother's lap. She's 6 months old. To her right is a woman who's got toys in a box and keeping her attention looking to the right. To the left, there's a loudspeaker and a black box that's going to light up when the baby does the right thing. We're testing the baby's ability to hear the difference between simple sounds like ah and e. Watch what this baby does.
Can a baby as young as 6 months old hear the difference between 2 vowels? This baby is trained to look for the toy when the sound changes. She's being distracted, so she'll turn only when she hears the difference in sounds. The key question, will she turn before the toy lights up?
E, 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 E.
That child is a genius, a genius. Now, what is important about this little task is that at 6 months, the babies are responding to all the sounds of all languages. Exactly 2 months later, this baby will turn only to the sound differences important to English. All other languages, Hindi, German, Russian, if that child is only listening to English, the brain has already focused on English. This measure of the child's ability to learn by 8 months which sounds are important predicts their language skills to the age of 3 and their reading readiness at the age of 5. At the age of 5. So this is a very simple measure that has long-range potential for understanding that child's language skills. Now, what we can also see is what's happening in the brain at that time when the child is learning this information. Our machinery now allows us to see how the brain is selecting which sounds to listen to, areas of the brain that light up for that particular set of sounds. And the areas are not only the auditory areas, but social areas. We know from our studies that what's going on in this learning period is not only the ability to computationally understand how many of each kind of sounds are being played, but their social skills are enacted as well. We've also been doing studies on the bilingual brain, and we can see for the first time that children who are exposed to both languages are doing very, very well as long as they're being talked to in their homes in both languages. So we've been studying 55 Head Start families in San Antonio, and there's really 2 stories here. One is how the babies are doing, and one is how the teenage mothers who are raising these kids who don't know anything about their child's brains respond to the information about the child's brain. We're seeing the children are thriving, and we're also seeing that these young mothers, this is a teenage mother who is holding her 4th child. These mothers, when they see and hear the story about brain development, they understand the role that they're playing. This exhausting work that they're doing is paying off in building a child's brain. The other thing science is showing is that 1, opportunities for learning are not equal, and 2, it makes a huge difference to the brain. If you look at Broca's area at the age of 5, so Broca's area is shown on the right, and you measure many variables with regard to the children and their families, the variable that stands out to predict the specialization in Broca's areas is socioeconomic status. So socioeconomic status measures, standardized measures, measure the education of the mother and the father and their occupations. And what we are seeing in these studies is that the brain's ability to function at the age of 5 depends upon the opportunities to learn. Our studies demonstrate that SES, as measured in the study, reflects the amount of language the children are hearing at home, the complexity of that language, the number of books in the home, their proximity to a library, the use of the library. So what you see here is a playing field that's not equal. Children who are coming from higher SES homes and have more opportunities to learn have Broca's areas, again, critical to language and reading, that are much more specialized than the children who do not have those early opportunities to learn. The final slide I want to show is what's happening in other countries. Other countries are responding to the information about brain development and the potency of early learning. I was in Hong Kong just a short while ago. This is a classroom that's called Infants, Toddlers, and Twos. And what's surprising about this picture is that the people standing next to the children are the dads. This school requires that entrance into the school is a pledge from the fathers that every Saturday that they're in town, they must show up with their children at 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, this is a fabulous school in which children learn through play. They do science, they do math, they do music. They do many kinds of language arts. It's a trilingual school, but it's all in a playful setting, and parents are very active in that play situation in which they're learning. Seems to me that if we're going to lead to the premises and support the premises that we're presenting all day today, that we'll take a cue from what's happening in Hong Kong and produce early learning environments for every one of our children who are born to thrive and to learn. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about early social learning, and I want to try to convince you today that we are literally born learning. Children learn implicitly by watching what we do, and that starts from very, very early age. So in a sense, children do not begin to learn, and we're not only beginning to be teachers when the children are in elementary school or even kindergarten, but even before they talk, when they lean forward on their high chair and look at us and try to make sense of what we're doing in front of them. In infancy, of course, children are learning simple behaviors from watching us. But by elementary school, they're absorbing the values and the attitudes, beliefs, and even the stereotypes that are shared in the culture that surrounds them. I want to talk a little bit about some research today showing this. But in all cases, you'll see throughout my short talk here how important people are to teaching young children. We are our children's first teachers, we are mentors for our children, and that applies even when they're in 0 to 5 before they've entered kindergarten. So how is it that a scientist shows that we are born learning and that that's not just a slogan, but a scientific fact? And the way we do that is we go into the newborn nursery. This is a picture of a 19-hour-old baby girl looking up at a human face. And what we're going to do in this study is show this baby different facial expressions to see if the baby can copy them. And so what the adult does is begin by putting out his tongue at the 19-hour-old baby. The baby's eyes converge as she looks up at this strange movement, and then she responds with a tongue protrusion of her own. When the adult switches to do a mouth opening, again, the eyes converge on the mouth, and then the baby responds with a mouth opening. Now, this is really remarkable because while the babies at 19 hours can look up at your face and see what you're doing, they can't look down and see their own face. And there are no mirrors in the womb, so a child has never seen their own face before. What this sort of science shows us is that babies are born connected to us, and that begins at birth. And even at birth, they're learning from us and desperately want to be like and absorb and act like the people that they see in the culture surrounding them. That begins at birth, and you'll see that play out in other ways that I'm going to get to. Now, we're very interested in looking at the brain science that underlies this profound social learning that we see in young children. This is a study done with 14-month-old babies who were wearing an EEG cap, and we were able to detect changes in the brain that are correlates of when the baby observes the behavior of other people and reproduces it themselves. It's a change in what's called the mu rhythm in the brain, and we're able to use that to investigate how the baby is responding to social interaction. Now, one of the important things for young children is to know not only to copy, but when not to copy what peers and adults are doing around you. And remarkably, this begins before kindergarten as well. We've designed some studies to look at this. These are studies at the roots of self-regulation in young children. And the way we do this is we show the baby something, a 14-month-old, something that the child really wants to imitate. We use a stick to push a button. The child wants to copy this, but we have another adult come in the room and get angry at the model for doing it as if it's a forbidden act and you're not supposed to do this in this culture. So I'm going to show you a short videotape, and this will become clearer. It's only 20 seconds. This is a 14-month-old. The child's on the bottom of the screen.
See? Look at this. There.
Hi, Barrett. I'm going to sit here and read a magazine.
Okay, that's Nina. Nina's going to sit and read a magazine. Nina, look at this.
That's aggravating. That's so annoying.
Oh, I thought it was really interesting.
Well, that's just your opinion. It's aggravating.
I know that doesn't happen in your home. It happens in Seattle. In any case, we then present these toys to the 14-month-old, and here's what the child does. Now, she's inhibiting her behavior, but the interesting thing is we did another study where Nina came in and got just as angry at their first adult, and then Nina left the room. We handed the baby the stick, and what did she do? She turned to make sure Nina was out of the room. She used the stick, and then she immediately did it. So What's interesting about this is that we may be able to use these infant behaviors to predict children's ability for self-regulation and an executive control when they enter school, and we're doing those studies now. This child is now 6 years old, and we're going to test this child next month to see what this child is like in terms of executive function now in first grade. We're also planning to study these children up through teenage years to see if these early behaviors predict, and we think they will. Now, we talked about children absorbing information from the culture and absorbing information in how we act, but they absorb not only the behaviors we do, but our values and even the stereotypes that surround them. One way we're looking at this is to look at stereotypes with respect to school that apply to different genders. In America, there is a prevalent stereotype, and it's not a reality, but a stereotype, that boys do math and girls don't do math. And as a developmental psychologist, we are interested in how these stereotypes that are out in the air in the culture are absorbed by young children and begin to affect their behavior. And in a paper that we published about 15 months ago, we discovered a developmental timeline that I just have plotted here. First, children develop what's called gender identity. Everybody's aware of this. In preschool years or even in infancy, they're aware, I'm a girl or I'm a boy. But then something interesting happens. They absorb the stereotype that math is not for girls, and we were able to demonstrate this as early as second grade in our scientific laboratory test. The girls respond systematically, and it's heartbreaking because it's before third grade when they learn the multiplication tables. The girls and the boys are already categorizing tasks as math is for boy, graph is for boy, arithmetic is for boy, addition is for boy, letter is for girl, reading is for girl. There's a remarkably consistent response given by the children as early as second grade. Then by third grade, our data show that they internalize this stereotype. They think, for instance, I'm a girl, girls don't do math is what the cultures say, and draw the inference, therefore I don't do math. And there's some evidence of them closing down their aspirations based on these cultural stereotypes. We, of course, want to change the American stereotype from girls don't do math to girls do math, I do math, and opening up the aspirations of the young children. So I want to close by just a very simple take-home message. Children are born learning. They're wired to absorb information from their culture. They're looking out at us, seeing what we do, and they desperately want to be like us, literally from the moment of birth. They're connected to us starting then. That's a good thing because we have much to teach them. It's also a challenge because children absorb our values, our habits, and even our stereotypes, and that affects their behavior. So the science prompts us to make a promise. And that promise is to be good role models for our young children, to be good mentors for our young children, and to help be guides for them because they are paying attention to what we do, not just what we say, and that begins at birth. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you. That was wonderful. I'm now pleased to introduce Dr. Lori Miller-Brotman, the director of the Center for Early Childhood Health and Development at NYU Langone Medical Center. Dr. Brotman brings over 20 years of research experience on children and families in low-income urban neighborhoods, focusing on family and school-based preventive interventions for young children. Dr. Brotman?
Thank you. There is compelling evidence that poverty and stress affect every aspect of a child's young life. Fortunately, successful preventive interventions early in life can lead to enormous return on investment. For 20 years, my colleagues and I have been developing and testing programs for families of low-income children as they make the important transition to school. The preschool period, as you've heard, is a critical time for children to develop the social, emotional, and behavioral skills that are necessary for school and life success. The transition to school is also a critical time for parents, especially parents who have not graduated from high school or have had bad experiences themselves. Therefore, we see the transition to school as providing a great opportunity to engage and support parents to help their children succeed. We developed a program called Parent Corps to be engaging to ethnically diverse, low-income families and to be accessible to all families as part of the pre-K experience. Parent Corps aims to support high-quality experiences at home and in the preschool setting for low-income children. This is a depiction of what we call a theory of change. A theory of change is used by scientists to explain why we think a program should work. Parent Corps is delivered in the pre-K period, and it includes a couple different components. One is professional development for early childhood teachers, and the second is a 13-session after-school program for families. Parent Corps helps teachers and parents to support positive behavior and use effective behavior management. By helping teachers to welcome and engage families, and by basing the family program at school with teacher involvement, Parent Corps aims to increase parent involvement in education. Based on the science of early childhood development and some of the discussions that we've heard earlier today, our theory is that we can improve the quality of both, if we can improve the quality of both the home environment and the early childhood pre-K experience, we should see improvements in self-regulation and early learning in kindergarten, and that these impacts will have consequences for lifelong health and development, including academic achievement. Thousands of parents and teachers so far have experienced Parent Corps, and I'm going to show you a brief video so that you can hear from some of these parents yourselves.
Before I learned about Parent Corps, I used to handle things a little rough, I would say. And just being in Parent Corps taught us how to react to our children in all ages.
When he crying, when it's time out crying, what are you supposed to do at this side? When he's crying, but he's still on time out.
What do you guys think? What do you do if your child's crying when they're in timeout? They want your attention. What do you guys do?
Ignore him. That's the best thing to do. Caleb don't like timeout. He don't like to be ignored, and he don't like to sit still for a moment. So it works.
The two-choice statement works way better for me than timeout shit.
In Parent Corps, we're going over a lot of different strategies that, you can put in your toolkit to use with your children. It makes me feel good when I see the parents from Parent Corps because they form relationships now. It brings the families into the school, it gets them involved in their children's education, and this is something that goes beyond pre-K. This is something that should follow the children and the parents throughout their child's educational life.
We've been using the Parent Corps tactics and tricks in our classroom for 3 years, and we see it working in first grade now.
It teaches you a lot of things on how to become a better parent and also to help your child become a better individual.
I think Parent Corps is a good thing because it teaches how the parents should treat their kids, and it teaches kids how to behave properly.
Can anybody tell me the rules for Friends School?
Keep your hands to yourself.
That's right. Keep your hands, feet, and all objects to yourself. And can anyone tell me what happens if we break a rule? Nayellis, I love the way you had your hand up. Can we please give Nayellis a sticker for having her hand up?
Sure.
Break a rule.
You will go to timeout.
All right, you go to timeout. Okay, let's sing our song. When you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. When you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Pearl, you just broke a house rule. Here's your timeout chair. We took her hand, we walked her over. Could you handle that?
Let's be real. After you go for a long day's work and you come home, you cook, you have dinner, you have your husband to take care of your other homework. I ain't doing all that. I'm not physically fighting, I just want to get him in the chair. The only how I'm getting Justin in a chair if I put crazy glue in the chair and stick his butt in there. I'm being real, Miss Shannon. That is,
So this is perfect. Thank you for your honesty. When your child is struggling with you, that's a place where you would feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it can get tricky, and what we say in that situation is you would say to your child, you either go to timeout or you're not going to get to watch TV for an hour.
Parent Corps teach me how to cope with children, how to cope with my own 2 kids, because I'm from the West Indies and we have a different skill down there, because back in the Caribbean, patients, we run out of it easy.
Yeah, people like to spank kids. They might scream at the kids. Here, we learn how we can just sit down and talk to the kids one-on-one, maybe give them time out. In the Caribbean, you don't know anything about giving time out.
I envision Parent Corps being in all our grades and all our schools throughout the country because it's such a positive program and it's an empowering program, giving parents the tools that they need to help their children.
Great mad face during our lesson, and he shared so nicely with Quadir when he was playing blocks.
I definitely think there should be parent corps all over the country, because the things that they learned in pre-K and that the parents of the pre-K learned, I think it went beyond what was in the pre-K curriculum.
What I would tell other fathers who are out there is that they should get involved with a program like Parent Corps. So they'll have someone else who they can depend on who can help them with their situations.
She worked so well with Miss Ann to put together a puzzle and remembered to use her magic words and said,
Well, I go to everybody and tell them if they're a kid pre-K, I say, y'all got to get in Parent Corps, because Parent Corps is very helpful. A lot of times we're on a fast-moving pace, and I think Parent Corps is something that would help the younger parents and the grandmothers how to deal with our children better.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think you can hear from their voices that, at least from their perspective, we're on the right track. I think we're really on to something in terms of engaging families. But now I'm going to take you through a whirlwind tour of some of the evidence from our studies funded by the Institute for Education Sciences, which is the research arm of the U.S. Department of Education. So far, we've carried out 2 major studies in New York City where we randomly assigned schools to get Parent Corps or pre-K education as usual. I'm going to show you some evidence from our current study taking place in school districts in Brooklyn, New York. And when we started this, they had high school graduation rates of 50%. This study took place in 10 elementary schools and included the pre-K students who entered school in 2005 through 2008. 1,050 children participated, and we continue to follow these children through elementary school. Almost 90% of families in these pre-K classes participated in the study, so we can really look at the impact of Parent Corps on the entire school population. So the first thing I'm going to do is to take a peek into the classrooms, and I'll start by saying that in these schools, we've carefully looked at the Parent Corps schools and the control schools at the beginning of the study, and we're clear that they're the same on student readiness, on parenting, on demographic characteristics, and on the classrooms that we're working in. And what you see in this slide here is we've sent coders into the classroom using a standardized rating system called the class, where they observe the teacher and the students and then rate their behavior and what they're seeing. And so what you see here on the left is codes of effective behavior management in the classroom, and the second one is on instructional productivity. And what this slide shows you is that after the first year, which is the first dot, the second year and the third year, you see the control classrooms staying about at the same level of a 4. And in the intervention classrooms, and those where the teachers have been trained, receive professional development on social and emotional learning in the classroom and how to engage families, you see an increase over time. And this puts them into the context of a high-quality classroom. So over a 3-year period, we've made those changes in these inner city and high-risk schools. So now we're going to take a quick peek into the homes of these families that you just saw. What this slide shows is 5 different domains of parenting. The first one is a test of knowledge. It's quite a difficult test to pass that asks questions about behavior management and how to support positive behavior in the home. The second is on supporting positive behavior at home. The third column is teacher ratings of how involved parents are at home and in the classroom. The fourth one is how confident they are in their ability to help their child at home and in the classroom. And the last bar is on effective behavior management. And what this is doing is comparing all the parents in Parent Corps schools to parents in the control schools. And if there were no differences, no impact from this program, you would see no bars and all the lines would be at 0. So anything above 0 is a significant impact. And the way to think about the size of the effects is that here we have the effect sizes from the Nurse-Family Partnership, which is a very well-known, rigorously tested home visiting program, with basically the same size effects in early childhood that lead to lifelong differences in academic achievement and other aspects of healthy development. So we know that we're changing the classrooms, we know that we're changing the home environment, and the real question is, does this do anything? I guess I wouldn't be here if it didn't do anything, but does it do anything in terms of academic achievement? And so here we're looking at standardized test scores individually administered to children by people who don't know if they're in intervention schools or control schools. And these are the scores at the end of kindergarten. So this is reading, writing, and math. These are effects for boys and girls, I'm happy to say, with the same effects for girls on math as boys. And also teacher ratings on academic performance and academic problems. And again, if we had no differences between the two conditions, we would see the bars at 0. And this shows us that we have impact on all these different areas. To put that into context, the shaded bar is the size of a well-known school-wide program called Success for All, which impacts reading achievement. And also a summary of the effect sizes for the model early childhood education programs that we've been hearing about, especially recently, that lead to long-term differences for children. So we're quite pleased with these effects. And one last set of slides to show you how we're thinking about this program. And so this is all based on kindergarten reading achievement. The first bar is what I showed you before, which is for all students. The second bar shows the effect on all students at the 4th year that we're in a school. And so what I showed you early on is that with each year of intervention in the school, the teachers are getting better. And we're moving the pre-K classrooms into be high-quality classrooms, especially by the end of the 3rd year. So this is for the 4th year of students coming into this school. We see an increased effect. The third bar shows an average across the years for children whose parents participated in the program. And so we see twice the effect size when there is active parent engagement. And the last bar shows really what we think is the potential of this intervention in the 4th year of the intervention in the school and also with parent participation. And just to put that into context, the 0.5 effect size is the black-white achievement gap. And so we feel like we are on the right track, that an investment in parents as well as teachers in early childhood classrooms is the way to help children succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. What an exciting group of presentations. We've got a few minutes here where we can talk about some of this. And Dr. Kuhl, as I listened to you, one of the things that I was thinking about is what kind of advice would you give to bilingual families?
I think bilingual families should understand that children have to listen to stories and play in both languages. Because our data show that if the children at home are listening in both of those languages, the parents shouldn't worry about language development. When we give credit to the words that children know in both languages, kids at 3, 4, and 5 either equal monolingual word development or they exceed. So that's one thing to tell them. The second thing to tell them is our studies are showing that children who have bilingual input are actually better at a particular cognitive task. They're more cognitively flexible. So cognitive flexibility doesn't mean you're smarter, but it does mean that if you're given a new problem and you have to invent a new solution, that your bilinguals are better at all ages. The babies and adults are better at solving that new problem.
In early literacy skills.
In early literacy skills, the same. So the brain is exercised by that switching between the two languages. It's preventive for Alzheimer's, and it slows cognitive aging.
Dr. Meltzoff, if kids are born learning, what kinds of advice should we be giving parents from the very beginning?
Right. Well, society needs to recognize that children are born learning, and they're absorbing these messages right from the beginning periods. And so I think when we work with parents, we find it very empowering to parents. It's an exhausting job to be a caretaker. Parents, caretakers, early daycare providers are exhausting, high burnout jobs. And when we bring parents, caretakers, and early providers into our laboratory and show them about brain development or how much the children are learning, they can understand the deep role that they're playing, that they are a mentor and a guide starting right in those first 5 years of life. So I think getting the science out to people who are using it on the ground is, tremendously important. And the science can be uplifting because instead of it just being changing diapers or feeding the child, you understand that you are building the brain of a child. You're doing some of the most important work of society, not only when you're a teacher K through 12, which is hugely important work, but 0 to K as well, where we're building the foundation for learning and life success.
So as you're building those inner synapses and those early connections, are there moments there that can be lost forever, or are these retrievable?
Well, human beings are amazingly resilient. That's another thing that the research shows. It's not exactly lost forever. Children can be rescued by having a good emotional contact with a mentor or a guide through their life, which is tremendously important. But we used to ignore the early period before the child could talk, before they could do activities with us as adults, especially the dads in the culture have often skipped over the youngest children. And I think it's important to recognize how important that early period is. And if we want to become a grad nation, as this conference is discussing, we really need to become a learning nation. And learning begins at birth. Those first 2,000 days are of huge importance to driving us to become the grad nation that we want to be.
When you were giving your presentation about math skills, I was thinking about reciprocal stereotypes. Do we have problems with boys in terms of language development and reading development because of the same kind of attitudes about what boys do versus what girls do?
Yeah, you're picking up the complement of it. I was talking about boys and math, and teachers often treat unconsciously the boys differently from the girls with respect to numeracy and math. I think you're absolutely right that that often happens with reading as well. If you have a book, teachers often, parents, caretakers, provide that to the little girl rather than the boy. We don't check our stereotypes at the door, alas. We walk around with our stereotypes. There's racial stereotypes, gender stereotypes, stereotypes about class, social class and learning. And we need to make people more aware of them and recognize that our children are absorbing those as we act in society with them.
Dr. Brotman, if you had the opportunity to talk to some very high-ranking government official, like maybe the Secretary of the Department of Education, would you give them any advice? Would you give him any advice on what you think we ought to be doing as a nation in terms of early learning?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. So I think that we are really at a crossroads, and it looks like we're ready to make investments in early childhood education of high quality. And I would ask that we consider the home environment and supporting parents to be partners in this process, and really thinking about what it takes to engage families and to help children succeed. The other thing that I didn't get to talk about is that by investing in parents, what we're also showing is that not only do we have these impacts on academic achievement, but we're having impact on health in terms of obesity, another very important problem in our country, on mental health. And I think that if policy leaders worked across these different sectors so that the same kind of investment can have outcomes in terms of health, education, criminal justice, that we would be in a much better place.
I really appreciate your comment where you bring health and education together in the same sentence, because as a pediatrician, I've never been able to figure out the difference between education and health. And as we go into each of those areas, it seems like the younger the child, the more those two things are intertwined. Now, we have Head Start sitting in our Department of Health Education, in HHS, and Health and Human Services, and we have other education programs in the Department of Education. Does that present any problem to the research community in funding the kind of work that you do in Seattle?
I think certainly the separation of organizations doesn't help the research agenda, because increasingly our studies are very interdisciplinary. They should involve multiple agencies. If you're interested in children in all contexts learning, then you want to be able to draw from sources of funding that cross those barriers. So the separation is not necessarily good for the research funding model.
The children are inherently interdisciplinary. They're inherently bipartisan. You know, the children aren't divided. It's the adults who are divided. And the children are learning about social, emotional things at the same time that they're learning about numeracy or learning about literacy or learning about self-control. So the child is doing all of it and doesn't see the boundaries. It's the adult brain that is crystallized and divided and segmented into parts. The children are actually what's called in neuroscience neurally plastic. They have the ability to change and be flexible at an early age that actually puts us to shame as adults. And that is related to what you're talking about. We as adults see things in silos. The children are seeing things in an interdisciplinary way. They don't know about the disciplines or about the political parties.
Takes all 5 of those promises. You know, as a pediatrician, one of my favorite things to do in the office is to present a child with a book. And there is this program called Reach Out and Read. I imagine most of our audience is familiar with it, where we give a book to a child starting at 6 months through their first 5 years of life, with each time they visit for a developmental assessment and well-child check, and model the role of reading. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. There have been studies, I don't know if you're aware of them, but whether you think that really has traction and whether that really can make a significant difference over the long run.
Right.
I think it makes a huge difference. I think handing a book to a mother of a 6-month-old, the mother might say, well, the baby's just going to chew on the book. You say, let them chew on it. They'll get the idea that those little black lines on the page are things that come alive, will allow the mind to come alive as mom reads these books.
We give them hard books when they're 6-month-old.
Great,
we know
great, plastic coated. I think that the brain research is showing us just how much is going on in that little brain as the child is not yet talking. You know, some of the brain images that we're looking at 6 months, at 9 months, at 12 months. 12 months you hear first words. Before that time, this computer up here is getting wired to not only select between languages, to sort of shape itself to be ready to talk back at 12 months, be ready to join the conversation in a social way. I think that's the astounding news that the brain science has brought to us that we wouldn't have otherwise known. You wouldn't know by looking at a 6-month-er or a 9-month-er what's actually going on up there. But when you see what's going on up there, then reading and talking to children and interacting with them, because it's all a social enterprise. We've shown that if you expose a 9-month-er to a new language from a live human being playing on the floor, like my graduate students and postdocs who come from other countries, the babies absorb that language in a way that makes them equivalent to the children at that age in the foreign country who've been listening for 10 months. But if you give them that same experience over a television set or an audio presentation and they watch a teddy bear on the screen, the kids stare at it with great interest, and you think for all the world that their brains are absorbing the information. But the brain tests before and after show that the only learning situation that works is the live human being socially interacting with the child. So the social brain turns on some of these fabulous mechanisms of learning that we see in the little kids. And that's something extremely important for us to take note of.
That's wonderful.
Can I add that one of the important messages for us, for parents, is that you can read to your child even if you can't read yourself. And that the importance of that, as you heard, is about the interaction. And it is about that time together. And empowering parents to know that they can help their children to succeed, even if they have their own limitations or they're uncomfortable with certain things. I think that's a really important message for parents.
Because reading also sometimes in disadvantaged situations mitigate some of the paucity of vocabulary in the household, that you can have someone read and use words that they would normally wouldn't use in their spoken language.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's correct.
Exactly. That 30 million word gap that's been measured at the age of 5 for children across different socioeconomic status families in which reading and talking is differentially engaged in. And so if by 5 children coming from homes in which there's a lot of reading and talking going on, the measurement shows there's a 30 million word difference. So again, as the brain science shows, that's not a level playing field. That's a 5-year-old who comes into the classroom with a brain that's ready to go, but hasn't had a brain that could have been ready to go, but didn't have the opportunities to learn. So it's not the children's skills, it's their opportunities to exercise those skills and engage in them in the early period.
When should we be teaching parents to be parents? And what can you tell us from all your experience, Dr. Brotman?
Well, we certainly know from the studies of some of the home visiting programs that it's not too early, that we start to teach parents how to talk to their kids before the babies are born. And our work is at the transition to school, where we're teaching parents to do different kind of things with parents, with their children. And so there's different kinds of things that become important with a 2, 3, 4-year-old in terms of noncompliance, in terms of listening, that we focus with parents on those kind of skills at that period in time. But it's certainly never too early.
Well, what can we do now? What's next? What are some of the things you would like to see come out of this conference and you would like to see us here who are in attendance listening to you and learning from you? What would you like to see us change and advocate for?
Well, I'm thinking that education is much on the national agenda now, and I think present administration is correct in thinking of it as not only going from K through 12 as education has traditionally been thought of, but linking 0 to K seamlessly with the K to 12 is hugely important and would be transformational to making this a grad nation and a learning nation. We need a seamless educational system. If we have children entering kindergarten, first grade, not with the level playing field, without the social emotional development, the self-regulation that I talked about, some of the academic skills, pre-academic skills that they have, it's more difficult to get them caught up and more difficult for the teachers. So there's a lot we can do, and by linking 0 to K through 12. And the other message, I think, is how it doesn't take high-tech gadgets to do it. It doesn't take a lot of money for the caretakers to do it. Children learn best from other people. Their brains learn best from the faces, voices, and actions of other people, from the warm embrace of other people, from the partnerships and social interactions with people who love them. Those don't take a lot of money. What it takes is awareness in the parents and caretakers that they're making a real difference in building their children's brain and a real difference of getting the children ready for school. And I think we need to get those messages out, and that will be a part of changing outcomes of education.
Let's give them all a round of applause. I think on that note, I don't know, unless you have some parting comments, did you want to make?
I want to make this one parting comment, that I would urge us as a nation to invest in the science, and that we don't want to just invest. We want to invest in early childhood, for sure. But we want to evaluate what we're doing as we're doing it, so that we really can understand what's the best intervention, at what time, who should it involve, so that we really do get the best return on investment for our dollars.
Sure. Right. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now on our special features stage, please welcome from AT&T, Charlene Lake.
Hello again and good afternoon. What a fabulous panel that was. You've given us a lot to think about and a lot to do. Thank you very much. Well, we all know and we've all heard that it takes a village to raise a child, but we also know that it takes a country to change a system, and that's exactly what GradNation is doing. GradNation is convening the country together to change our educational system, and during a time when it is really difficult to bring together diverse groups. That's exactly what we're doing through the 400 partners and affiliates. And during a time that desperately needs sustained commitment to big dreams and lofty goals, that's exactly what we have. We've all shared since 2008 the goal that we're going to reach 90% graduation by 2020. And that means that there's no school that's going to be graduating less than 80% of its students. But you might recall, as we started out on that journey, there was something that was standing in our way. And that something was Newton's first law. Now, for those of you who may not recall, Newton's first law says that a body in motion, a mass, tends to stay in motion, and a body at rest tends to stay at rest. Now, for any of you who have high school students in your house, you know that a body at rest tends to stay at rest. But the same can be said of those graduation rates. That mass, that graduation rate, had not moved. Some said it had terminal problems. It suffered from decades and decades of inertia. So we confronted that inertia in graduation rates by getting Newton's second law working for us. We became a force, and Newton's second law simply says that force equals mass times acceleration. So we've been accelerating and we've been generating force. In April of 2008, when America's Promise introduced the Dropout Prevention Campaign, our community summits were one of the many tactics across the country that accelerated the development of workable solutions for the dropout crisis. So the collective force of all of us in the country who really cared about this issue resulted in those high school rates starting to improve. And the number of high schools graduating only 60% or less, fewer students, our dropout factories actually declined. But unfortunately, even with that progress, we were not on track to meet our goal. But we picked up something important, and that was momentum. So Newton says momentum equals mass times velocity. In our case, we applied force.
People out there who tell me all the reasons why poor children can't learn and why black and brown children can't learn. But
to be honest, I don't quite feel successful yet. I'm moving in the right direction though. Because I am lucky to have found the right supports that I need, now I know myself as an individual